Welcome to the Sacred Life. I am your host, Aaron Beachy, and today we are coming to you from Higher Ground Fellowship Church in Kokomo, Indiana. We at the Sacred Life are dedicated to practical Christian ideas. This episode will be the first in a series on education. Joining us today will be one of our contributors, John Baylor. John, welcome.
Thank you.
John, can you tell us, how does education relate to practical Christianity?
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of conversations with David, who's kind of the main visionary behind the Sacred Life. And every time we talk about these Christian ideas, then I'm always pressing, what's the application? What's the meaning of this? How does this play out in a person's life? How does it relate to this? How does it relate to this? How does it relate to this? And I keep going back, partly because of my teaching experience, but I keep going back to education. How does this relate to education? And he just says, John, I don't know. I don't know about education. So he doesn't hardly want to talk about it very much. But eventually he said, you know what, you should just do a series on education. So it really is, it's in the interest of improving education, but also in exploring some of the ideas that we talk about on here. I personally believe that our public school systems in America are not in a good state right now. And I'm not alone in thinking that, but I get the sense that most people that think we have a bad system don't really understand what the problems are. They say, like, well, if only teachers were getting paid more, which would be nice, but that's not going to solve our problems.
Right.
And I think that the problem is really a problem of meaninglessness. And in particular, that probably applies on all levels, but in particular, we ask students to do work, and from the student's perspective, the work that we ask them to do has no meaning, and it's just some kind of hoop that they have to jump through. Now, I think that it's going to be really difficult for somebody, I would just say somebody outside of the church, to recognize a problem of meaningless. And I think it's going to be much more difficult for somebody outside of the church to solve a problem of meaningless. And I don't mean that it's necessarily an explicitly Christian. I want solutions that could function in a secular public school. But I think the church has to be the one providing those answers.
All right. John has taught in college. He has a master's degree in English. He's taught in public high school, has taught in Christian therapeutic boarding school. So go ahead and let John take it away.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to look today at this problem of meaninglessness in education. And I'm going to deal quite a bit with ideas from the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who is a Holocaust survivor. And in the concentration camps, he noticed that there were some differences that he noticed in the people that survived and the people that didn't survive. So these observations for him are like a matter of life and death. And he noted that for people to survive, they needed to have something to live for. They need to have a future goal or a purpose, some kind of hope, love for something other than themselves, or responsibility for something other than themselves. And when people lacked that, then they would not survive. They would get sick of something. So there'd be some kind of physical, official cause of death. But he saw that there was this kind of root cause of lack of meaning, lack of something to live for. In the first part of the book, he describes his experiences in concentration camps. And that's really the best known or best remembered part of the book. In the second part, he talks about his therapeutic approach, which he calls logotherapy, which is essentially when somebody has some sort of psychological problem, then we need to find a way to reconnect them with meaning in life. Now, I'm going to start off with some observations from his book. Not everything will come from that book because he's not really talking about education, and that's where I want to get to. But in that work, he says that meaninglessness leads to conformity or totalitarianism. Those are like two different paths that it can go down. If you have no meaning in life, then you are just going to be just like everyone else, conformity. Or you're going to do whatever someone else tells you to do, and that mentality leads to totalitarianism because some terrible leader can take over and control everybody because they're just going to do whatever someone tells them to do. He says also, this is all in that second part on logotherapy, meaninglessness leads to the will to power, which is a phrase he picks up from Nietzsche, or the will to pleasure. And he says these are the ways that people try to fill the void of meaning that they're lacking. Either I'm going to seize power in the world, or I'm just going to pursue every kind of pleasure that comes my way. And then he also says meaninglessness contributes to alcoholism, drug addiction, and suicide. And in education, we're very interested in training the character of our students. I used to think that making kids do something that they don't regard as meaningful, I used to think that was a waste of time. I think, you put somebody through 12 years of of primary school and high school plus kindergarten, so you give them 13 years of schooling, and for a lot of that time they're doing stuff that they don't love, they don't engage with. Then I used to think that was a waste of time, because they could be doing something that they do love, that they are interested in, that they can engage with. And they would be learning a lot more than if they're learning something that they don't regard as meaningful. They would be engaged, their minds would be more engaged. But now I think that that's actually worse than a waste of time. Because if we want to instill values in children, we want to instill integrity, honesty, courage, kindness, curiosity, ingenuity, confidence, self-control, like whatever it is we're trying to develop in kids, if we want to instill character in children, then, take a look at the slide in front of you and consider, what are we actually doing to them if we force them to do work that is meaninglessness? This idea of conformity, the will to power, the will to pleasure, alcoholism, drug addiction, and suicide, this is what we are actually instilling in our students when we are forcing them to do things that are meaningless. And again, that's way worse than simply wasting their time. We're making the bulk of their formative years meaningless. And the results are just not good. So in conclusion of that thought, I think that we can't do character education if we're mostly demanding students to do meaningless work. And to extend that a little farther, you can't do Christian education if you're mostly demanding that students do meaningless work. Okay, I was talking with my wife. I'll depart a little bit from what Viktor Frankl said, because mostly so far I've just drawn on his. But I was talking with my wife about some concerns that she had with the education our daughter is receiving. And she had a lot of different complaints, and I wanted to kind of organize her complaints a little bit for her. So I took out a piece of paper and I made 2 columns on it. And this, I don't have the piece of paper, but this is my best reproduction of it that I could make. There were some things that she thought there was too much of at this school, and some things that she thought there was not enough of. So too much, I'll just read through the list here. Too much memorization of facts, too much measurement, measuring grades, doing tests, these kind of things. Too much emphasis on doing everything perfectly, emphasis on obedience, and too much homework, which partly she didn't like that because that's control over our family time. And the impact that we as parents are able to have on her education as well. Too many worksheets, and she felt like there was maybe other more meaningful work that she could be doing than what she was doing. So that's what she said there's too much of. Not enough exploration, play, creativity, freedom, which would mean student choice or self-directed learning, and hands-on experience. And I don't want to say that the things on the left-hand side are bad and the things on the right are good. That's not my goal, but they're kind of out of balance in my daughter's education, or so it seems. So I wrote this list down, and I said, these are basically, you can divide these into left brain and right brain. The left brain way of approaching a problem is going to be all based on measurement, is going to be all based on like control and obedience and doing things perfectly the way that they're supposed to be done. And it could be very structured. It could be very rigorous, but it lacks this sort of openness and intuitiveness that the right brain way of engaging has. And so I wrote for her left brain and right brain on this page. That's how I labeled it for her. And the left brain way of approaching a problem does provide a lot of structure and a lot of order. It turns ideas into something that's actually useful. But it's this right brain approach that is actually the source of meaning and value and purpose. Ian McGilchrist says that the left brain will look at things that are alive as if they're non-living, and the right brain will look at things that are living that are non-living, excuse me, as if they are alive, as if they have something sacred about them. It's this right brain function again that connects us with a sense of meaning. It's not grades. It's not work and obedience. And there's a place for those things, but we are not going to get meaning and value and a deep sense of purpose from those things. And so for my wife, I framed this as left brain and right brain. If I'd been talking to someone else, I might have framed these in terms of order and chaos, or yin and yang, or just masculine ways of thinking versus feminine, or assertive or receptive intelligence or approach to learning. The clenched right hand, the open left hand. So these are all just different ways that societies through time have tried to make this same kind of chart that I was making. And again, I already sort of hinted at this big picture. It's not that the left brain is bad and the right brain is good. And there are some alternative pedagogies that sort of set it up in that way. Like every form of exploration, every form of self-directed learning is good. Every sort of control, ordered, measurable thing is bad. Well, I don't think that's quite fair. I think that that rational thought is not bad. Order and structure are not bad. Measurement is not bad. Categorizing, compartmentalizing, those aren't bad. The things in that left brain column all have utility, and the things on the right all have value and meaning. And when we shift too far to the creative, intuitive right brain side, we lose utility. We lose our ability to actually have a real impact on the world. When we shift too far to the left brain rational side, then things become meaningless. It's a structure that we're going through just for the sake of the structure. The things that we do in school are just for the sake of the system. So our goal really is integration. We want to have both of these things. We want integration of creativity and memorization, integration of work and play. We want clear structure to exist, and we also want it to exist in such a way that still grants us freedom. We want integration of discipline and also of exploration. Those two things are actually sort of at odds with each other, but they need to both be living and functioning at the same time and in the same place and in the same classroom. We need to have some things that are graded and measured. I think, like in our system, there's no way that we can escape that. But we also need to have things where we can divert our attention away from the grade, away from the measurement, and focus it instead on like the deep, wonderful nature of the subject that's being learned. And then we need an integration of abstract book learning and actual experience. So that's really what we're shooting for. And now back to Frankl and some of his conclusions. He gives some insight into how we find meaning. And these are a few of the answers that he gives. We find meaning through creativity and work. And this is something, again, there are alternative pedagogies that try to bring more creativity in. We find meaning through experience and through encountering someone. And so in terms of education experience, this could be hands-on experience, could be some kind of field work. But it also could be, now this, I'll go to this idea of encountering someone, loving someone, or even loving something. As a teacher, you don't necessarily have to be giving kids hands-on experiences all the time in order for them to have an experience in the classroom. We talk about great teachers as like someone that made the subject come alive. Because of that great teacher, I was able to encounter something when I came into that classroom. And it was just by the power of the word, by the power of that great teacher's speaking, and maybe storytelling ability. That class, we might also say, is an experience. Even when we're not on a field trip or whatever, we're still having an experience when we go into that class. And we could even say, like, I really encountered that subject matter. So this sense of encounter makes that classroom feel more meaningful than the next class across on the other side of the hall. And then also, I think we can get a little bit of this sense of experience or encountering someone when the subject matter does apply to our personal lives. For sake of time, I don't want to say too much about applying subject matter to a student's personal lives. I will say, as an English teacher, I had a lot of ability to do that. when we're reading a story and we're talking, you say, about themes of the story. Well, I tried to consider, all right, well, if I'm in a sophomore in high school, which is the most recent grade that I taught, if I was a sophomore in high school right now, how would the themes from this story play out in my life, in my relationships, and my difficulties in relationships? Not it's harder for a math teacher to do that, but certainly an English teacher, there are lots of opportunities to connect the deep questions in literature to the deep questions that your students are already asking about their own lives. And then another thought on encountering someone. We learn in the context of relationships, and it's important for teachers to connect with students, and also students not only to connect with their teachers, but to connect with each other as well. We see something as valuable because other people value it, and that's what I mean when I say, like, we learn in the context of relationships. If something is important to my dear friend, then I'm much more likely to take interest in it and to see it as meaningful than if I don't know anybody that values it. And I think this is a weakness of like digital classrooms and things like that, or like AIs that teach people or determine the curriculum or something like that. If you're not around an actual teacher that really values the subject, then it's just a computer telling you what to do. And that is not going to be a meaningful experience for most students. You're going to get a sense of value from encountering someone that values that thing. Okay, then he also says you've got to work for something other than yourself. And then I put a note on here. He talked about the therapist rather than the student, or sorry, the client rather than the student. But the student needs to see what is valuable. The teacher might see what's valuable. I mean, of course, you want your teacher to see the value in what he is teaching or what she's teaching, but it's something that has to exist for the student. So in the classroom, a lot of your goal is just to convey this sort of sense of wonder with the subject matter, so that the student can catch on. It has to be ultimately the student that sees the value. It has to ultimately be the student that makes the discovery. Okay, so those are a few thoughts from Frankl's book. And then I wanted to, before I do wrap this up, I know it says the end up here, but I did want to discuss a little bit what is the spiritual philosophy at work here, because I talked a little bit about the sort of rational left-brained approach to education and the right-brained approach to education. And this does grow directly out of these conversations that I've had with others here at the Sacred Life. If you have a rational approach to God and his words and his commands, and that rational approach excludes experience of the divine, and it excludes mystery and relationship and awe and wonder and fear and uncertainty, then you don't know God. That rational approach that cuts all that other stuff off is cutting you off from relationship with God and from your ability to I don't even want to say perceive the truth of God, but like to dwell in the truth of God. Writing the law of God on your heart does not mean memorizing the truth. It means continually beholding it, experiencing it, and living it. And for teachers, the truth that we teach in school is the truth of God, and we need to be doing more than asking students to memorize it, and doing more than asking them to be able to use it on a test or on an assignment. We want them to behold it and experience and live in it. We want them to be transformed by it and explore it. We want them to have a relationship to truth and beauty, and not just a memory of it. And we want this for our students, and we want this for ourselves as well. We want to be transformed. Okay, thank you guys for listening. I hope there's something useful in there for whether you're a teacher or an administrator, or whether you're a parent, or whether you're a child. Hopefully there's something in here that's useful as you try to grow in knowledge and lead others as well.